Okay, I think we're live. I was just having a little bit of trouble with the old internet there, the old Wi-Fi. But anyway, we are here to talk about Thor in Endgame. And yes, we're going to analyse what happens in the film and what we can learn from him, of course. But one of the main things I want to cover is how mental health is portrayed on the screen, how we look at someone that's having a really hard time, how it looks from the outside and how it might feel from the inside and the differences there. So that's going to be one of the main themes and patterns we talk about at the start of the video, and then towards the end I will give you the sort of play-by-play, almost scene-by-scene analysis of what happens specifically with Thor and his journey. But we want to really focus it on us first, because at Love and Fandom we believe the relationships we see on the screen help us to understand ourselves at a deeper level and have a better relationship with ourselves and each other. I'm Cheryl. If we haven't met before, hello, welcome. If this is your thing, subscribe, like, share the video, comment, all that good stuff. Before we jump in and before I start talking about how mental health, PTSD, and really someone going through a very, very difficult time is portrayed on the screen, I'd love for you to share below, what do you think of the way that Thor was portrayed in Endgame, specifically when Hulk went to see him in New Asgard, you know, the whole quote-unquote fat Thor. What do you think about it? What do you think about how it was portrayed? And what do you think could have been done differently or better? I'd love to hear your point of view. From my point of view, both personally and professionally, there's a lot that they got right that was accurate, but the way that they approached it was to approach it as a bit of a joke, right? Just the very term fat Thor is really insensitive and wrong on multiple levels. This is traumatized Thor. This is a man, yes, albeit a god, but a person who's lost everything. I would be so bold as to suggest that his brother's murder was one of the more traumatic things that happened to him. He's had a lot of bad shit happen to him. This appeared to be the trauma that is maybe it was the straw that broke the camel's back, because he had lots of big things happen, but this was extremely difficult. He lost the Asgardians and Heimdall and his brother, and it happened in front of him, and he was helpless. And he feels, it seems, tremendous guilt and responsibility, and that's why he was the one to take out Thanos both times. So Hulk goes in to see him. He goes to New Asgard. There's that scene of, you know, Hulk sat in the back of the truck trundling along this village, which I believe is in Scotland somewhere. And he says to Valkyrie, like, where is he? And she says, oh, he only comes out once every 2 weeks when the, you know, the beer gets here. So he goes in and he sees Thor wandering around, not looking like himself. And there's various different things that happens. I'm actually going to link a video up above. I want you to watch it, and I want you to really observe and really notice the types of things that are happening that indicate something's really, really wrong with Thor, and see how many things you can spot. There's a few things that stand out. One is that he has no purpose, right? He's usually a very purposeful person. He has no purpose, no motivation. He has given up. He's given up. He's involved in activities that are really not usual for him. You know, the activities he used to enjoy, he's not doing them anymore. He is trying to numb the pain with alcohol, right? That's quite obvious. You don't need me or anyone to tell you that. That's quite an obvious thing. He has triggers around certain words, so the T word. And as soon as Hulk says it, or it's Bruce Hulk, isn't it? What do we call Bruce Hulk when he's like both? I don't know if there's a name for him, I'm not sure. He says there might be a way that we can fix things. Thor says, what, like the cable? It's been driving me bananas for weeks. And Hulk says, no, like Thanos. And there's a shift in Thor. And this is really accurate with people that are extremely traumatized. There's a word or a sound or a phrase, or there's something that's a big trigger. And we see this with him, and we see him going silent. We see him having this fury move through him. And Thor doesn't refer to Thanos by name. He calls him that guy. And then I believe it's Korg that stands up and says, yeah, we actually don't say that name around here. We don't say that around here. One thing that Thor does have is he has a friend throughout this. He has what we would call in psychology and emotional regulation and counseling, coaching and all of that, we would call this his secure base. Korg is Thor's secure base, meaning he's always there. there seems to be this unconditional positive regard. He's not judging Thor. They're just there together, and he's there and he's always present. And Thor obviously defends him with the video game thing. But this is all very consistent with someone who's been extremely heavily traumatized. So do go ahead and watch that video. I linked it way back. It might be still in the sidebar somewhere. Or is it on this side for you? I'm not sure which way I should be pointing. But watch that clip and just see how many signs you can notice that something's really wrong with Thor. What's different about him? They obviously gave him an overhaul in terms of his appearance. This is like a completely different human being. And this is, well, Asgardian. And this is what happens with trauma, right? We become a shell of our former selves. We are almost unrecognizable. And this is what we see with him. I'm studying mental health at the moment. I'm also going for a counselling qualification in addition to the coaching that I've been doing for 8 years. And in the mental health qualification, we were talking about how mental health is portrayed on the screen. I think this is a really great example of it in the way that it was shown in an accurate way for all the ways I've just described. And there's this kind of joke of, oh, look, Thor's put on weight. Oh, look, he's got a beer. Look, he's drinking lots of beer. And Rocket kind of makes it into a joke like, oh, there's beer on the ship. And he's like, well, I've just run out of beer, so off I go. And there's this constant joke of like, what's running through his veins? Cheese whiz, these kind of jabs and jokes. And it's only really Hulk that says to me, are you okay, buddy? And of course, Thor's like, I'm fine. But it's only really Hulk that puts his hand on his shoulder and says, are you all right? And then he says, you're in a bad place. I get it. I've been there. Do you know who helped me out? I was like, oh, was it Natasha? He said, no, it was you. And it was. We've talked about that, remember, in the Age of Ultron video. It was Thor that tried to bring Hulk out of a dark place. This is a really beautiful full circle moment where Thor's now able to receive that support, albeit he's not really ready to receive it. And sometimes that happens when we're going through a dark time, right? We're not really ready to receive that help, but he's there. I think the Avengers could have done a much better job, honestly. The people around him could have done a much better job of saying, we need to get him some help. However, what can we learn about ourselves from that, right? What is familiar to you? What can you take from that? Is there anything else I want to say about that? No, that's the big section I wanted to cover. So now let's go into some of the scenes. So first scene, this is the scene when he's talking to all the Avengers, and he's explaining what he knows about the ether, the Infinity Stone. He goes through what happened, and he basically starts to recount all of his traumatic experiences. He talks about his mother dying and Jane's not here anymore and all these things, and he starts to get really emotional. And I believe it was Tony that says, would you like to sit down? He goes, no, I would like a Bloody Mary, which is like, I don't want to sit down, I don't want to think about it, I want to numb, I want to forget. He does this in Asgard too, right? He says he's going to the wine cellar just before he sees his mother, and Rocket says, who's the fancy broad? And he says, my mother. She dies today. I mean, that just makes me want to cry. Can you imagine if you went back in time and you went back to the day when something happens and you know that person's going to pass away today? Like, it makes me feel incredibly emotional, right? That's brutal. So he's on Asgard the day his mother is killed. I can't think of anything more traumatic for Thor at this point. So again, he's in this pattern of self-medicating with alcohol. Just to give myself a second here. In the next scene, we see that he gets a chance to talk to his mother. So there's this kind of reconciliation, and she's so warm and empathetic. And she was like this with Loki as well, this beautiful, nurturing, mothering energy. So what I'd like you to look at here is the relationship you have with your own mother. And if it's not good, or you felt that your mother was not available to you in some way or didn't give you the type of warmth that you needed. And this is without any blame, by the way. I don't know your personal situation, but what was your relationship to that figure in your life that was warm and nurturing? Did you have that or not? And if you don't have that, how can you be that for yourself today? So Frigga says, in such a warm, compassionate way, the future hasn't been kind to you, has it? And Thor denies being from the future, and there's that whole thing. She says, I see with more than my eyes. We know that. We know she's psychic and a witch and all these different things, a sorceress. And then he goes on to describe what he's been through. It cuts to him talking to his mom, and he says his body was there, his head was over there, and at that point I was too late. So we can infer what he's been talking about there. It's probably the first time he's been talking about this, because he doesn't want to talk to anyone else in Asgard. He wants to just shut himself away and say, ask the Asgardians how much my help is worth. I'm worthless here. So again, this theme of worth with Thor coming up, right? His worth is tied to being able to save other people. So he's able to talk to his mum about it, probably quite healing for him as much as it possibly could be. And he says, I've missed you, Mum. And there's this really beautiful moment between them. Now, by that inference, of course, Frigga knows she probably doesn't have much longer left to live, because the inference is if Thor from the future misses her, she probably isn't present in the future. So there's also that bit where Thor summons his hammer and he's absolutely delighted and, dare I say, shocked that he catches it. And he says, I'm still worthy. Because he thinks he failed, therefore he's unworthy. So again, this whole thing of his worth is external. We've talked about this a lot before, but just look at where that's present for you as well in your life. Where is your worth tied to something external? When we think that what we need is outside of ourselves, it creates some really fucked up dynamics in our life in terms of our relationships, our work, our relationship with ourselves, all the things we do. We'll bend over backwards for people because we think that's where our worth is going to be. So just look at where that is true for you as well. So he thinks something happened and it made him unworthy. So what happens next? The next scene that Thor is in, a lot happens with the Avengers. But the next time we see Thor, Natasha has gone to the place with the soul stone. What's it called? Someone remind me in the comments below. No, what, I can't remember what it's called. The one with Red Skull. What's the place called? So she's gone there. She's gone. And Thor gets really angry about this. He's talking to Tony and he's sort of in Tony's face and he goes, why are we acting like she's dead? Stop this shit. We're the Avengers. Let's get it together. So he's at this point where he's really enraged. He really can't lose anyone else. This is his grief coming up, right? He's angry. He can't lose anyone else. It's very interesting. If you go back and watch that scene, you can just obviously put it into YouTube and Google it. It's very interesting how Thor reacts, and he feels again a duty, like we need to bring her back. And there's also that moment where someone says, I think it's Steve says, does she have family? Can we contact anyone? And I think it's Tony who says, yeah, she has family. It's us. It's beautiful, right? I think Natasha's death is one of the most emotional that I've seen in the MCU, maybe because I just love that character. Now, final fight. So we see Thor standing there like a Viking king that he is, very consistent with the mythology of what Thor was, right? This Viking king that's very, well-built man. And he has Mjölnir in one hand, Stormbreaker in the other. And he says, let's kill him properly this time. So he's on this redemption arc. Of course, Steve catches the hammer. Oh my God, what a moment. Thor says, I knew it. I knew Steve was worthy. And then there is the scene. Mjölnir comes in. Steve snaps it back like he's been swinging this thing his whole life. It looks great on him. He's got the shield and he's got the hammer, and he says, Avengers, catch, assemble. Iconic moment. I don't know a comic book fan that didn't have chills when that happened. I'm nerding out thinking about it. Here's what's significant with Thor. He's at the front of the group. He's next to Steve. This is a really interesting parallel to the Avengers, where Thor at the beginning of the film was a lone wolf saying, I've come to put an end to Loki's slaughter. I've come to stop this villain. Thanos was the one behind it the whole time. Of course, so really the villain was Thanos the whole time. We know this. But at the start of the Avengers, Thor was the lone wolf. Now he's working as a team. You probably know what I'm going to say, but where in your life is that taking place? This is really, really common with a lot of my clients, actually, who are really successful and self-made, and they've got there not because of relying on themselves, but in spite of relying on themselves. But they have this association of like, I'm successful because of me, because it's all on me. And I'm like, there might be another way. There might be another way to get support. And often it's showing up at work for them. They're not really trusting their assistant or their team to do things right, and it's all on them. And they overwork and they're exhausted, and it comes back to feeling like they're the lone wolf. Where does that come from? It comes from having a time in your life when you needed support and it wasn't there. So it's really, really great for Thor that he's able to see that he's been supported through a difficult time. He was supported by Korg, not really anyone else, frankly. Everyone sort of let him down and was like, oh, let's allow Thor to just sit in his cottage and just drink. Let's not actually get him any support, even though he's on Earth and therapy exists here on Earth. Let's get him some support. But they didn't. However, he's supported by his friend Korg, and that is what gives him the ability to snap back and go back to his friends, his family, the Avengers. Right? We'll talk about his adopted family shortly. So the point there was to say that when Steve says Avengers assemble, Thor's at the front of the group and he's really leading the charge with all of these beings from all over the universe. So Thor is leading the charge with that. So he's definitely learned how to work as a team, which is a really nice full circle to what we started talking about at the beginning of this series, the Odinsons Family Drama, of which this is part 8. It is the final one I'm streaming. However, I'll put the clips in order, put the videos in order, so that the next one you see will be Thor Love Thunder. However, I have already recorded it. So Thor also, next scene, he takes it upon himself to intervene in the garden, meaning when they go and see Thanos. So that Thanos wins, right, in that situation. He escapes, he uses the stones. I get a bit hazy on what happens at the end of Endgame, honestly. But I know they managed to reverse things. Anyway, so Thor is the one that kills Thanos. And his last words to his daughter Nebula are, "Perhaps I treated you too harshly." So there's a bit of a healing moment for them, if that can happen between a Titan and a robot. I don't know. But we know how badly he's treated his daughter. So he says, "Perhaps I treated you too harshly." And then, of course, Thor comes in, swings Stormbreaker off with his head. And then one of the Avengers, Steve or Hulk, I forget, says, "What did you do?" And he's completely disassociating, and he just says blankly, "I went for the head," and he drops Stormbreaker, or walks out with Stormbreaker and just walks off. His job is done. Excuse me. This whole thing with Thor wanting to finish Thanos is he's a man of his word. He said, "You're going to die for this," knowing what Thanos did to Heimdall, Loki, the Asgardians. But this is really to avenge his brother. I am willing to say, after everything we've looked at, of all of Thor's relationships, I'm willing to say the relationship with his brother is the one that's affected him the most deeply. I'm willing to say that. Out of everyone he's ever met. You could say Jane, but I think it's his brother. That's the one that runs the most deeply. He's known him for 1,000 years, right? I think it's his brother's relationship that impacted him the most deeply. Apparently, we're going to get Thor and Loki in Loki season 2. Apparently, that's going to happen. I will keep an eye on the Twitter machine to see what's happening at San Diego Comic-Con, and I shall be doing some more videos on that, on potentially what could happen and what that could mean for both of them in their healing journey. So, final scene before we get into the over to you bit. So, of course, we have the Valkyrie scene in New Asgard, stood on the kind of moorland, the cliff type clearing place, grass place overlooking the ocean. Thor is flirting with her. She's not having it. She's like, "It's a friendly good look. No, what are you doing?" It's a bit awkward. But then who comes down? His adopted family, the Asgardians of the galaxy, back together again. And of course, there's the exchange between him and Star-Lord where Thor is in charge. So Thor always wants to be the leader. He's regained his leadership position, and he's gone through this beautiful redemption arc and this journey of healing, which is then continued in Thor Love and Thunder. I love what they did with it. I loved Love and Thunder. I was not prepared for it to be as emotional as it was, and I really thought they portrayed him in a very sensitive light, and it felt true to who he is. I know some people hated it. I personally loved it. Anyway, over to you. So, as well as the questions I've been through throughout the video, of which it came off the top of my head and I honestly can't quite remember what was said, so please jot that down as you're going through. But here are some questions for you to ask yourself. So Thor has this redemption arc, and this is really karma, right? It's karma and rewriting what happened in the past. So is there an area of your life where this needs to happen? What's your redemption arc? Here's the clue. If there's a pattern that's coming up again and again and again in relationships, with your friends, with work, with your finances, there's something you need to learn there. There's a lesson that needs to be learned. There's action that needs to be taken. There's some kind of atonement. Atonement is a spiritual principle to mean making something right and atoning for our mistakes, admitting where we were wrong, admitting where we've made mistakes and correcting it. They say the best apology is change behavior, and the universe works, or God or whoever you have faith in. The higher powers work in exactly the same way, in that the best apology to ourself, our soul, our higher power is change behavior. Learn the lesson from this pattern that you're in. Get help if you need to. I'm here if you resonate with me and my work. And there's a ton of free trainings on the website. You can go there and check them out. There's various different programs enrolling at various different times. If you're not sure what's right for you, just get yourself on the email list. You can get on the general email list. There is a link on my website for that. And I'll put the link down below as well. So you might need to hire help. You might need to be in a program to work out what is it that's going on in my life repeatedly, in my relationships repeatedly. Why am I pushing love away? Why am I in these fictional relationships? Why am I falling in love with fictional men? Is it because they feel safer? Okay, I know that. I've been to therapy, but my therapist doesn't understand it. I don't know how to break the cycle. All of those things, it might be time to get help. I would, no pun intended by get help, which is a Thor and Loki thing. But if you want that, I would go through, I'd do Fangirl Obsession Decoded is what I would do. So figure out what the pattern is and what you need to learn, and you might need to hire help if you've been stuck for a long, long time. And the second question is, who are the family you choose for yourself? Just like Thor chooses the Asgardians of the galaxy, who are your adoptive family? Right? Friends of the family we choose for ourselves. We get to choose who's around us now. We didn't get to choose that when we were small. We get to choose that now. And that is part of the healing process. Look at your relationships. Look who is, what did I hear the other day? It was said so brilliantly by a pastor of whose name I cannot recall. But he was saying which relationship is an asset and which relationship is a liability, right? An asset appreciates, it grows in value. That's someone who's going to help you on your journey and help you be the best that you can be. Liability is something that costs you and that takes from you and slows you down. So who's an asset in your life, who's a liability? And if there are more liabilities than assets, then there are some changes to be made. Okay, my loves, thank you for being here. I'd love for you to, if you get to the end of the video, the magic word today, if you get to the end of the video, is gonna be cog. K-O-R-G. Just put cog in the comments below so I know that you've got this far. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications if you like this sort of content. We are all about the self-love, self-growth, self-awareness, looking through the lens of film and television. Marvel are not paying for our therapy, so we're going to do it. And I loved having you here. It's been amazing. Thank you for watching the whole entire Thor series. I'm ready to honestly not think or talk about Thor for quite some time. It's been a lot of content. But I'm going to be doing different series next. I'm going to be jumping out of Marvel. We're going to be going on to Stranger Things. So I shall have to subscribe to Netflix and see what's on there. We're going to do Stranger Things and Arcane. I'm excited to get some anime here. And I've heard good things about Stranger Things. So that is what's coming up next. Thank you for being here. You're amazing. And remember, you are absolutely worthy of love. See you next time.